Hello, my name is Lava Man, and over the past couple months, I've been doing something else on the side, uh, in addition to my Shattered Diamond work, which has been pretty hectic. Sorry for the delay on the 42 evaluation. I know it's probably going to be forever until the next episode comes out, but until that, um, one of the things I've been doing over the past couple months is ripping Mega Man tile sets. Um, all the nest tiles, 1 through 6, just everything. Liter like straight from the source. You know, all the unused stuff, even posting corrections and things like I mean, and palette animations, the CHR banks, everything. So yeah, it's been a lot of work. First couple of games are obviously not too bad, but then you have the MMC3 chip, and that's when things get really that's when things really get a pain to deal with. But it's been a fun challenge. Thanks to Valo for basically giving me the idea. Because like Sprites Incorporated is a very common source, but it doesn't. It's tile rips aren't really complete. There aren't really a lot of complete tile rips out there at all. It's mostly just maps of stages, and people, I guess, get tiles from there. So yeah, no, this actually, you know, showcases things directly from the source and what have you, where things are stored, how they're assembled, things that didn't get used, some of it useful, some of it not. Um, the whole shebang. 5 has been a pretty big challenge because of all the bank switching and the palette changing and what have you. I even managed to find some errors and correct them. So it's been a lot of fun. But today I'm going to show everyone in the audience how to rip their own tile set in case there's, just in case there's something I like. Not there's something I've missed, but I haven't done 6. No, 6 is probably going to be the biggest pain because of the bank switching. But just in case you have your own palette, you just want to know like how things work and everything. When I'm done proofreading everything, I'll try to submit it to Sprites Incorporated or post it on a giant blog or do something with it. Try to submit it somewhere for people to use. But yeah, until that happens, I've gotten most of the Robot Master stages down. The only ones at large at the moment are Crystal Man and Napalm Man. And I think Napalm Man is a good place to start. So, usually when you start assembling a tile set, part of what you're gonna want to do is get the CHR with you. The CHR ROM is short for character ROM, and it has all the code related storage information. Well, code and graphics. So the first thing you're gonna want to do is get some ROM hacking equipment. Getting the CHR itself is the first step, obviously. You're also gonna need a ROM of some kind that you're ripping to begin with. And of course, Legacy Collection 1 and 2 technically have the ROMs stored within them if you want a legit way to access them. Anyway, here I've got 5 all loaded up. All this garbled nonsense is code. That's stuff you're probably not going to want to edit over. You can, but it'll probably cause some issues. Like it might just not work entirely. But then there's, you know, sprite information, unused sprites, Kuker V classic, Susie G. You get the point. Is that the unused hammer enemy? Yeah, it's the unused hammer enemy. Okay. But we're not here to rip sprites, we're here to rip tile sets. So here, what I usually do is I just screen cap this one piece at a time, and then I open up paint.net, line everything up, set all the colors to the palette I want, and then resize everything by 50%. And that will give us our CHR, which all the tileset stuff I've just put here, and then I made a second one reorganize, like putting everything in more chronological order. So yeah, we have a CHR. Next, you're obviously going to want to need some kind of palette. You can obviously look up the NES palette. There are plenty of different versions. I have my own custom one that's pretty similar to the Famicom EUX palette, but it actually uses samples from 9 and 10 rips on Sprites Incorporated. So it's the 9 and 10 palette, not including the base dark gray and a couple of off-palette error things, like Roll's face and an Endless Attack background that uses a slightly different shade of turquoise and a slightly different shade of dark blue. That's besides the point. Here you have, this is basically every color. These are slightly, you can technically consider them different colors to this, but I have made them the same. And these two shades of white and all these shades of black, I've made them the same for the sake of consistency, visual consistency, so people don't accidentally like sample something, then they're inadvertently using like an off color or something. Yeah, NES colors are confusing. This is sort of internally how it would go. Next, of course, you're going to want to sample the palettes, and yeah, we'll just... Obviously, if you don't know how NES console imitations work, you can have 4 palettes at once, and each 16 by 16 block will be assigned to one of these 4 palettes, and there will be one universal background color. And the tiles are technically like transparent, save for that one background color, so it would be more like this, overlaid over black, which is how you're able to get away with foreground effects and stuff. Yeah. So I'm gonna start up my emulator and just then I go to debug, I open up PPU viewer, which enables you to see what palette and bank is currently active playing within the ROM as it's chugging. We're gonna go to Napalm. You can see all the palettes going on right here. It's pretty fun. And here we see the colors have hex values assigned to them, and it can be a bit complicated to memorize. There are charts and things, but generally speaking, there are two digits, and the first digit is, well, let's start with 29, yeah. 29, 19, and 0B. Okay, that's okay. Whatever. I usually don't write them down, but because I usually just have them on the top of my head and then I sample them. But that's, yep, Microsoft Paint. Where would I be without it? let's see, it was 29, 19, and 0B. Gonna double check one more time. Yeah, that's our first palette. So, the first digit, the first digit determines what row the color is going to be on. So it goes, in hex it goes 0, 1, 2, and 3. So 2, we know it's here. And then the second digit shows what column it's going to be on, and this, you can usually consider this like the hue. The first digit can be like considered the value, the second's going to be the hue. So the 9th column, it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F, because we're talking hex. Instead of going to 10, it continues on A, B, C, D, E, F, and then F is 16, no, 15, because you're counting 0. And then 1, 0 in hex would be 16, because it's hexadecimal. So yeah, so 1, 9 would be, so 1, oh, whoops, why do I use this middle color? No, the first color is 2, 9, which means row 2 is sort of a middle hue, and then column 9, or lime green. So the first color is lime green, second color is 1, 9, which is the color right above that. It's sort of like a darker lime green, and then 0B, this is 9, this is A, this is B. The shades of red and the shades of green get a little confusing, but it's this color. Yeah, that's our first palette right there. Then of course we have 27170B. The 7th column is probably the most frequently used in Mega Man tile sets. And we have 392718. 39, okay. 2, 7, and then 1, 8. That's a weird hue shift, but okay. It's okay if you don't memorize how the. It's okay if you don't memorize how the palette goes. I just like to have a separate palette. You can obviously use Famicom EUX's colors right here. You can just use this palette. It's pretty good. I'd say it has a pretty good balance of values. It doesn't oversaturate or desaturate things. Every color is pretty much useful. And our last palette is 2414 and 03. Okay, that's a bit easier to memorize. It's just 4th column and then purple. Okay, we have our first palette. Obviously, you're gonna want to. Well, you can technically open a palette editor in the ROM hacking tool of your choice. So, Mega FLEX in this case, because I'm playing an MMC3 chip game, 3 through 6. Where was I? Oh yeah. But what I like to do is, obviously, if I'm, it makes more. Not every palette is going to trigger when you're cycling through the stage in an editor, so it's, yeah, probably should have. Forgot I was playing 5, my bad. You're gonna want to have to play through the stage. Napalm's stage, gameplay-wise, isn't very riveting. I know this turned into a Let's Play all cutaway when I've reached a new palette. Okay, we've technically reached a new palette. This animation fade-in, whoops, is a new palette. Well, it's a new palette animation. Palette animations are a bit hectic to deal with if you aren't using a ROM editor, because then you basically have to replay it and save state and screen cap things, and it would just be a pain. So we're gonna come back to that animation through the editor. Yay, free E-Tank. Riveting. Here we have a couple more switching animations, so again, gonna have to come back to the editor for that one, but I'll put all these to the side to know that, to remind myself that I have to deal with them. It's actually the first two palettes, so there we go. Because the rock palette is still being used. And we are back. Rather interesting. Oh. What the hell? Hold on. What the oh, okay. That's bizarre as fuck. Obviously, to keep the grass active, it uses, you know, a palette similar to the palm tree palette we saw earlier, but then also uses the first color being that 2-7, that orange for the sky, as seen before. It all compresses that into a single palette, and so that another palette can be used. This 382718, which is very similar to the rock palette already in use, except for that 3.8, which is more of a like a normal yellowish tan instead of a slightly lime green color. Which, I mean, it makes more sense, but the rock palette is still the same here, so this extra one is actually for something else, which we'll see later. But yeah, that's a bit of a weird choice, but that's a fun part of breaking down and ripping tile sets. You get to see some of the goofs, some of the mistakes, and some of the clever choices as well. You literally get to see the minds of the creators when they're working on it. So the palette is actually for you know, this tile set right here. Which is a slightly different palette from this, but I don't think that was entirely necessary. Like, this could have used the same palette. Kind of a silly choice if it's only a one color difference, but whatever. And they're like right next to each other on the palette chart itself, so that's kind of dumb. But we also have this teal palette going on. It's just 1C, 2, 3, 1C, 2C, 3C. Sounds silly as hell to say, but yeah, it's just all these it's just everything on the cyan column, 1, 2, and 3, not including 0C. You'll see a lot of palettes that work similarly to that, more so in Mega Man 6, which does a lot less hue shifting within palettes. And then it changed palettes again. We have 0.8 and then a 0.9. So 0.9 is obviously this one, as we've mentioned. Now that we've dropped down and we're not in a rocky environment anymore, I like to sort of chart which palettes are being used in specific points of the stage, so I know, you know, what palette would be active with what other palette during what point of the stage. So 0.9 would be this, 0.8 is your typical brown. Sometimes this is emulated as a dark brown. It's usually more of a reddish color, like the darkest shade of red. It's a bit weird and semi-arbitrary, but yeah. Let's see. Yeah, okay. We're reaching the end of the stage. I think the last palette change is the the purple. I mean the pink. Why did I say purple? The flashing pink lights. So, yeah, again, I'm gonna have to open up the editor for that. But that should be every palette. I don't think I missed anything. The rest of the stage is a load of nothing. Yeah. Like how you're able to jump under these guys. I know, bit of a tangent. Yep. Yep. I could have slid past that last gap, but whatever. And yeah, that's the stage. So that's the CHR editor. Don't need that. I was just there to show you how I get my stuff. Now we open up the palette editor. Gonna want to go to Napalm, of course. It's good to have the screen active so you know what part of the stage you're doing. So we already know about all this. That's not a palette animation, that's a bank animation. It's a switch between. You'll see a lot of bank switching in 5, but it's when the top half or one chunk of the CHR, like one row, or maybe in this case the whole bottom half, because 5 can only handle things in large chunks like this, switches to another location within the CHR. And that's how you get away with animations like this. Gravity Man, obviously, does it the most frequently with 4 different frames of animation within the CHR bank. Pretty crazy shit, but yeah. So just letting you know that with some rips, especially 5 and 6, you're gonna have to deal with that. Sometimes you have to fiddle through the ROM to find where it's stored because it's not all in the same place, which is kind of annoying. Like for Chargeman's graphics. Anyway, yeah, typical stuff. Then we have this. Thankfully, each palette animation is assigned to an ID, so you can piece together what palette is used for what. This is obviously for Wily 2. It's the background animation for that. Pretty typical shit going on. This is probably different fade-in animation. These are for Waveman's bike section. I forget what this is for. Oh yeah, also Wave. More Wave stuff. This, no, that's not it either. Sometimes you have to find things. Sometimes, like, the animation will be checked off, so if I go here, then I'm able to see, okay, palette animation 1B and 1C. Are right here. So that actually saves a bit of time. Oh, that's funny. That's cute. The palette is almost identical to the palm tree palette. So maybe it maybe it palette switched at one point. That would have been funny. That's funny to think about. Yeah, it's the thing about peeling back the layers, but yeah. And then there's the blink flashing palette right there. So I kind of want to find out where the drill is real quick. It's got to be around here somewhere. Oh, is that it? Nah, that is not it. That's Wily 2 again. At one point, you'll end up seeing just a bunch of garbled duplicates of existing palettes. So fade-in effect isn't here. I believe that's a pre-programmed thing, like in 4 with Brightman. There is no way they would be able to like have an individual palette animation for every single fade out. It would just be impossible. So they have a pre-programmed thing for that. So I'm gonna have to go back and just screen cap the individual frames. It's not the most fun thing, but you know, save states. It's not too bad. We're just gonna have to come back to the fade in effect later. Everything else though we can check for ourselves. So this is palette 1B. I said, yeah. So we can see here at this first waterfall goes 3C, 2C, 2, 0. 3C and 2C look very similar to each other in different palettes depending on your emulator, which I really don't agree with. I think UX's choice to make it it's more in line with how it's supposed to look. I don't see why they had to do it like that, but whatever. Then it sort of cycles to the right, like that. And then one more time with the shit at the center. With the white at the center. There we go. So that is our waterfall, our foreground waterfall palette, and then we have the darker equivalent. Which is quite literally just the darker equivalent. Oh, whoops. It should just be the same order, but slightly different values, so. Bam, 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 and bam. So we got our two palette animations. This one is in a slightly different order. It starts with this one. Then it goes like that, and then it goes like that. Okay. So this one's actually a bit different. The order, anyway. It cycles like that. And just to check, to make sure I'm not wrong, yeah, the white is to the right here, but it's at the center here. So, yeah, that palette animation's done. Then there's just the purple. There it is. It's just 4 frames. Okay, that's not as bad as I was expecting. Two, 5, 4, F, and then it cycles. That's simple enough. 2, 5. Oh, that's 3, 5. 0, 4. Okay. And then F is black. So 2, 5, 0, 4. 0, 4, 2, 5. 2, 5, 4, and 4, 2, 5. Okay. Bam, 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 bam. You'll see that there are three. You may observe that there are 3 colors here, but you know, obviously 4 in the palette because you have that extra universal color. That's obviously also shown here. So yeah. Just double checking to make sure I didn't miss anything. Nope, that's about correct. Alright, so we have our palettes. I will... Whoops. That's the thing about using MS Paint. You don't really have layers to work with, so transparent selection is your go-to. I guess I'll just put them here. There you have it. All the palettes are here. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay, it's assigned to the second palette. Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, that was a lot of work, but we have all of our palettes. You can kind of tell which are for cycling, which ones aren't, but if you want to organize them then a little more closely, then you do you. I like to then take the palette in the CHR, then I open up paint.net, and just tweak that out, and whoops, and then start assigning all the palettes to the CHR itself, and then I'll piece the tile set together from there. In 1 and 2, this is obviously a lot easier to do because you don't have to assemble all the little meta tiles. They come pre-packaged. Let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11 palettes. Okay, that's a mouthful. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There we go. So obviously you're going to want to take your photo editor of choice and swap all the colors of this palette to that for this layer. That's the first palette. Then of course we have the second. Obviously it's easiest to just have in the CHR white as the first color, gray as the second color, darker gray as the third color, and then black as the fourth. Makes things a lot simpler. That's usually how the palettes will be organized. Others like to be weird about it, but usually that doesn't happen too often. This is a bit tedious work, so I'll come back when all the palettes are implemented. Okay, all the palettes are in place. Except for the palette animations, which I've assigned to this, which is deliberately off palette, you know, just to label that it's the palette reserved for palette animations. So yeah, all the regular static stuff I then paste it here. And you'll already start to see that some pieces make sense and others less sense with certain colors on them. Five is just one of those games that holistically likes to show off its graphical capabilities, so I think it was a good decision to start the tutorial with this one and not something more hectic. Is that everything? Should be everything. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. That's everything. Now comes the tedious and more painful part of extracting every possible graphic that would show up under a specific palette. So now we open FLEX back up again. You don't really need palette editor anymore. That comes in handy if you want to, if there are like if there are just, whoops. If there are just, you know, like some like crazy palette animations, you can cycle animations on or off. Different ones. Which will prove useful in keeping track of what color is what. But if there are some palettes that just don't load in, you can always just, you know, assign your own palettes to things. Bada bing, bada boom. If you accidentally screw up the ROM, it's always good to have the reload button on you. Just reload the ROM. As long as you don't save over anything, you should be good. You know. So now we're gonna want to open up the TSA table. The tile table, counterintuitively, is just the current CHR stuff. You can obviously control the cycling animation for yourself, depending on how hectic it is. Here, it doesn't really detriment us from having it moving. But here we get to see every assembled tile and how it is stored, which is pretty neat, pretty interesting. Some of it's obviously, some of it looks completely off palette because that palette hasn't loaded in yet. And then other times, in other stages, there will be tiles that look like a complete garbled mess because they rely on a part of the bank that hasn't loaded in yet either. So, yeah. This is generally... So for an example, I guess I can show off, like, Starman. Everything looks like a mess here. This is readable, this is not readable, and then neither is this, but a couple screens later, that palette, that CHR is loaded in, so now I can see it's just this, and that, and then these, and now the satellite's completely unreadable. So, yeah. We're at Napalm. Alright, now comes the tedious work of... Well, you can see what palettes are active and what tiles use what palette. Sometimes it's hard to tell, but now we can see, okay, this uses kind of the tree trunk palette, and this obviously uses the leaf palette, etc., etc. So just as a quick... I guess since every green palette uses the... With the CHR, obviously, you're gonna have to... With the bank switching palette, the bank switching tiles, you're obviously gonna have to be careful and make sure that you keep track of every individual meta tile. Like, okay, if that switches, then that also has to switch. I realize the top of the bank is actually here. You can see in the bottom it's by 64 pixels, so yeah. But generally, this is where we start assembling stuff. So this first... Oh yeah, you can also hold right-click on the map itself to sort of see what tiles are implemented where. There's also a structure table if you don't know how ROM hacking works. Tiles are arranged in 32 by 32 structures. So, yeah, that's why you can't just like place a single 16 by 16 tile willy-nilly. This isn't Mega Man Maker, sadly. You're going to have to be resourceful with how things are placed. So that's why a lot of tiles in general are looped by 32 by 32. Because by 48 is painfully impractical. By 64 makes some sense, but you'll take up too much space by that point. So yeah. But we see here that the tile looks something like this. You can see mostly where tiles are stored. Sometimes it's a game of I Spy, but we're gonna want to yoink the tiles out of the bank. Obviously, you can check the bottom left if you're in Paint to see whether you have selected an interval of 8 or not. Sometimes that proves to be more helpful. Pretty sure these don't show up using this palette, so I can just delete them. You're going to want to be careful with that when you're clearing tiles out of the way, but I'm pretty sure it just extends to the palm leaves. I don't have to worry about anything. And we see here the top left corner of the tile probably uses this, and then it probably uses this too, or not. I think that might go somewhere else. You don't always know where things are placed and why until later. It's kind of one of those things you have to figure out as you go. But if I place this here, this is probably a place where I want to stop the palette from stop the tiles from moving. Oh god. Boop. You can see here. Then I cycle forward a frame, then I cycle back a frame. Sometimes I have to hunch over it. That, yes, this is indeed how they're supposed to be assembled. Obviously, with bank switching, it's really tedious, so you're going to have to want to repeat the same thing if you're assembling everything by hand. You could obviously just pop open a map, like a Mega Man map, rip or whatever, and then just look for every tile that doesn't match. But that's the lazy route. This way you actually get to see what's underneath the hood. So to copy the same thing here, we get that. And then the other 8 meta tiles. Whoops. And then the other 8 meta tiles within this one 16 by 16 block are just plain green. So I can just do this. There you go. That's our first. Yeah, it's not the most glamorous process. It's not the most glamorous process, but it has its moments. Usually I like to have the window open as I'm working. So I can look here and then I can go, okay, this goes here, that goes here. Sometimes it's stored like that. I have no idea what the hell this is supposed to be, but we'll worry about that later. it helps to have intervals of 8 memorized when assembling. Okay, and then that goes here. This goes here. I think it does. Yeah. Pretty basic stuff at the end of the day. There's sometimes with more complicated tiles where there's also bank switching and palette switching involved. You have to do some detective work and fiddle around to make sure that a certain tile is actually used and what tile it would look like and where it is located. There are a lot of unused tiles that usually show up within a TSA table because this is literally the devs' assembled work on what tiles should be loaded in. So a lot of the time you'll end up with assembled tiles that are completely unused, some of them readable, others complete garbled messes. So as a recent throwaway example, you have the infamous mini boss unused tentacle bit. You have some more mundane stuff in Gravity, nothing mind-blowing that's unused. Here we actually have what the unused metal tiles and Stone Man actually would have looked like as they were assembled in the TSA. Some of them weren't used when assembled in the TSA, so I just include them as meta tiles. So this is an interesting little chunk from Gyro Man, for instance. You get the picture. Yeah. But that's generally the process. After you're done covering a single palette and you're sure that's where that specific palette is used within the stage, then you're going to want to move on to the next palette, and so on and so forth. That's usually how I do things. Might be more efficient means, but I haven't figured them out yet. One last thing to note, of course, is that I love to keep track of what blocks are used, what blocks are not used. So what I like to do, because this is a ROM hacking tool and space is important, there is a tool to clear all the TSA blocks within a level. So any tiles that aren't currently used within the level will be completely wiped. So I like to just sort of screenshot how the TSA looks, then maybe screenshot the other 4 parts, line them up in a photo editor, and then I clear all the tiles, and then I like to compare and contrast what tiles got used and which ones didn't make the cut. So we can see here, obviously this napalm drill piece didn't get used. It probably means, considering it's in this palette, it probably means that it was like something else in that part of the CHR. So just looking at it, we can kind of see that, yeah, it's stored right there. So maybe some other graphic was originally there before it got overwritten for storage concerns, because you can see some of the napalm drill is down here, and then some of it is here. So my presumption is that it would be another piece of grass, some more grass to spice up how it would have looked. But it's I would count as an unused tile, and then you keep on going. There's a little bit of foliage there, for instance, and so on and so forth. This is garbled nothingness. you get the point. You might be asking to yourself, okay, well then why the hell are there 2 ladders? Well, you can kind of see right here, one is the top of a ladder and one is the rest of a ladder. In a lot of Mega Man games, the top of the ladder is coded as a separate instance because you also have that top solid jump through on the top, I guess, is the logic behind that. But yeah, that's how I rip tile sets. I will keep going. Hopefully 6 won't be too painful. 5 is already a gigantic chore. And then I'll keep you posted when I finish ripping everything. So until then, this is Lava Man, signing off.